A telephone call from Gary's Aunt Loretta to the family. Uncle Dino was in the hospital. Gary having questions, but realized that reciprocation wouldn't be forthcoming from his family as the circumstances were still unknown. Accompanying his father and mother to join his aunt at the San Francisco hospital, his two sisters opting to remain home. The three arriving, his uncle alert and cantankerous, the teen having never visited an individual in a hospital before. Gary standing somewhat aloof behind his parents in the hospital ward, noticing the various IVs and tubes connected to Dino, the physicians listing his condition as critical, cirrhosis of the liver, with major internal hemorrhaging. Gary understood the seriousness, but his Uncle Dino's burly physical exterior and personality brought to mind a toughness, and a movie script conclusion, that all would end well. The visit was drawing to a conclusion in the multi-bed hospital ward as the commotion began. Apparently Dino was upset with something his Aunt Loretta had said, because he began shouting in Italian, attempting to get out of bed, pulling his tubing loose, and with the arrival of the staff, the family retreated, the weekend visit coming to a conclusion. The following Tuesday, October 7, 1958, Gary coming home from school, being informed that his Uncle Dino had died. Dino's 35-year-old son Silvio, from a previous marriage, whom Gary had met only once, stepping in, administering the final arrangements. Gary reflecting on the inference of Dino's passing. There was no funeral notice for Dino that Gary was aware of, except for a brief notification in the San Francisco Examiner, but later discovering Dino was interned at an Italian cemetery in the small town of Calma, south of San Francisco in San Mateo County. A small 2-square-mile town, noted as the City of Souls, but referred to as the City of the Dead, because of the large number of cemeteries fulfilling the township's area. On March 26, 1900, the state of California passed a law prohibiting the burial of person on residential and farm property, no more family members buried at the home place. In 1912, the city of San Francisco made known its intent to prohibit all burials in the city. In 1914 the city took the ordinance a step further, issuing an order that every interned body would have to be removed, and interned outside the San Francisco city limits. The removal and transfer of the thousands wasn't completed until 1937. The small 2-square-mile town of Calma, bordering San Francisco, having accepting over 125,000 departed. With Dino's passing, Aunt Loretta continued her residency on Steiner Street, Gary's dad providing assistance in maintaining some semblance to a disorganized situation. The closing of the 813 Van Ness Avenue Dino's number 13 club was on the agenda, his Aunt Loretta remaining somewhat above a grievous condition as expected, the truth being discerned. Her relationship with Dino was more of a convenience than a marriage. Parked in the basement garage of his aunt's Steiner Street residence was the Tognazzi's 1949 Cadillac Fleetwood, picture perfect. Odometer stating less than 52,000 miles. The teen surmising the Cadillac's low mileage was, it was said his uncle never traveled much out of the Bay Area. Gary was aware, like his mother, his aunt was a non-driver, and in all probability wouldn't keep the car. The youth, after some forethought, knowing that he had a good relationship with his aunt, in years past, stopping to visit her at the bar on his way to Golden Gate Park and the planetarium. Deciding that he would just ask her outright about borrowing T. Fleetwood to drive to school. Somewhat hesitant, he approached his aunt prepared for a negative response, but to his surprise, she said she didn't have a problem with him using the car, but with the stipulation of Dad's approval. Gary relating his aunt's decision to his dad, who paused before answering, then saying okay, but with the same two stipulations that prevailed with the use of the family car. The first being, offer to provide a ride to and from school for his sister Kay. And then the most difficult one to comply with, drive directly home after school, and park it. Gary was excited, his dad driving him to Aunt Loretta's Steiner Street residence across from the Almo Square Park, so he could drive the Cadillac back, and surprisingly his sister Kay asked if she could go. Gary could feel the titillation as they opened the garage door. Inside, resting like an animate gargoyle decked in chrome, displaying its distinctive tail fins, the longest Cadillac in production, the four-door exuberant mobile Fleetwood, the apotheosis of the automobile industry. Before leaving, Gary's dad giving a word of caution about ferrying the car across the Bay Bridge, as Gary had never driven across the bridge before. The brother and sister seated in opulence, implementing the Cadillac transport onto the lit-up iridescent glowing Bay Bridge in the early twilight of evening. Not indeed a trip, but a voyage home. Gary could hardly wait. The morrow would augment the inauguration of a new status in school transportation for him. The teen was solitary in his first morning Fleetwood venture to Castlemont, seated alone, beginning to sense some reluctance about displaying such a capacious conveyance. Choosing to park the car in the same place as the family car, on Alvin Groom Court, located just before you get to Castlemont on MacArthur Boulevard. It was common knowledge, after school, it was a given, the automotive pretentious students would cruise MacArthur Boulevard, their motorized display passing several times in front of the school. Gary delivering the Fleetwood from its parked area, taking residence with the cruising after-school traffic on MacArthur, voyaging past the high school citadel with an expression of certainty. Making a U-turn at 90th Avenue. Approaching the school, engaging a control he had never used before. Automatic windshield washers with the dash-mounted delay controls, the blades of the wipers dispersing the cleansing spraying water. The traffic halted in front of the school, Gary reaching down to turn the washer off, not sure of the controls, a panic, he's unable to stop the flow. A spray of aqueous water continuing with the wipers still activated. It was apparent, the onlookers having noticed his dilemma, and it was also apparent. They thought the moment humorous. The slight teenager in the large Fleetwood continued in his attempt to challenge the apparatus, but to no avail. After exhausting the supply of washer fluid, the disconcerted embarrassment came to a halt. Eyes focused straight ahead, the reticent youth retired to the journey home up over 82nd Avenue. Gary wasn't troubled with the news. The explanation was plausible. His aunt having called propagating the advice from the estate attorney, the prestigious San Francisco Italian Aliotto law firm. The Cadillac Fleetwood was deemed property of the estate, and would have to remain in storage until settlement. The use of the Fleetwood was apropos to its name, as it was fleeting, Gary drawing a conclusion from his experience: opulence is earned, not bestowed. It was totally unexpected, Gary's dad trading in the '48 Chevrolet Stylemaster, a 1956 Plymouth Belvedere V8 taking up residence at the Wilson household. Gary was somewhat elated, but the rules about cruising after school were still in effect, but on occasion he would surreptitiously make an exception. On one occasion inviting his younger neighbor Milton, Babe, Pepitone, who was his sister Kay's age, to accompany him on a short jaunt after school. The two heading northeast on Mountain Boulevard to the recently completed Warren Freeway section, to the Caldecott Tunnel turnoff. Returning back, Gary noticing the traffic was flowing faster than the speed limit, turning to Babe asking if he had ever been over 100 mph in a car. Babe answered in the negative. Gary, having never driven that fast, put the pedal to the metal, watching the speedometer surpass the 100 mark, immediately backing down to the speed limit. Once home, he cautioned Babe not to say anything to anybody about what they just did. It was a weeks later, Gary's dad, when mentioning his using the family car to go to Dale Spady's house in Castro Valley, slipped in a directive. He also didn't want to hear about any 100-mile-per-hour speeding tickets. The teenager was amazed how parents intuitively perceived information about supposed unspoken events.